Good morning.
Morning. This is the Workspaces of Tomorrow session, like on an airplane. If you're not here for that, you may want to go elsewhere. But I'm glad you're here today. Thank you. Thank you for attending. We're going to try to be informative for you as part of this, certainly. And I'd be remiss before we start to talk about the organization that certainly I'm part of and representing, and what the panelists are representing as part of IMCCA. You know, we're an industry trade group that promotes the collaboration industry. It's free to end users, so if you're an end user and you want some educational material about the collaboration and the workspace and what all we're doing in that space, please go down to booth 2969. Again, it's free membership for you, and we're welcome to have you. And I'm happy to have our panelists here, some of our members of the organization. And we'll do introductions around that a little later. So a little bit about me. Gray-haired guy that they asked me to play in this environment. I've been in this space for a long time. I've been in it on the manufacturer side, the software side, the hardware side, the integration side of the business. So I've got a good sense of building products, implementing products, managing services associated with the products. I've been the chairman of the IMCCA, and I've been a member of the board now for about 6 or 7 years. So I'm very pro on the organization, and again, I'd like you to take a look at it. My day job, how I feed the family, is being the VP of Sales of Condeco, and we're in the space management business, the collaboration business. So we look at how we optimize your space, how we optimize your collaboration resources, and at the end of the day, try to optimize the way you do business. So we have a booth down there as well, 2975. So if you've got some time, I'd welcome to host you down there as well. But we're really going to talk about change, and this is one of the slides I like. David Danto fed me this slide, and I like to use it, just because as I was growing up, these are some big things that led the industry. You look at Tower Records and taxi cabs and travel agencies, etc. The change of today has driven to the largest hotel chain that doesn't own any real estate, right, which is Airbnb. Right? The largest taxi company that doesn't own taxis, which is Uber. Right? Significant changes out within the industry. The way real estate is sold today is dramatically changing as well. From I'm paying 3% on the seller and 3% on the buyer to I'm starting to buy this online and paying 1.5%. So the end of the story here is that although there's a lot of change, many organizations aren't adapting to change, and we're going to talk a lot about that today. We believe, I think the panelists here believe, that the technology to support this works. The real challenge around this is managing change management, and getting the outcomes you want out of that. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. So, with that spirit, are these people working? They may be, maybe not. Right? But the reality is, I know I've worked in all those types of environments, whether I'm at my kid's game and taking phone calls and driving business there, whether I'm traditionally working by sitting in an office spot. The reality is, with the 24/7 access and the technology that allows the remote capabilities, it's really working is what you do, not where you go. Right? And that's one of the things that we believe. Right? The definition was I used to have to go to work. Right? Work is where you are in that environment. And we're going to talk about that today as well. So yesterday's office, I think everybody knows the traditional workspace. It's a high-rise building. All of your core functional areas are within that building. If I've got to go to marketing, I've got to go to the 4th floor. If I have to go to finance, I'm going to the 3rd floor. That's just not the way business works today. Right? Business is distributed. My finance team is in New York. My marketing team is in California. Our group leadership is in London, and I think it's reflective of many other organizations now. So if you have a distributed work environment, do you have a technology that supports that distributed work environment? So if we have this distributed work environment and more people are now working from home, are you really utilizing the space that you have, the physical workspace, the real estate? Are you utilizing that to the utmost of its capacity? Studies have shown, and the trend continues, that we're not. Desk utilization runs in the 35 to 40%. As you can see here, this is a little older, but it's getting worse. Right? Meeting areas are 25 to 30%. So if you do the math there, and you know the underutilization times it by the dollar per square foot that you're paying, the savings of re-altering or modifying your workspace, right? Huddle rooms, right? Maybe less of the larger technology rooms can translate to significant savings in your environment. So what are the compelling events that drive this? Right? A lot of it is cost savings. If you're talking to the real estate side, it's cost savings, right, of the reasons I just talked about. But there's other compelling events, right? There's the productivity component, activity-based working. Put people together in the right workspace that has common functionalities, and you should get more productivity. At least that's what we're saying. We'll talk about that later. I'll ask you, the audience, are you seeing that as well? Some of it is to improve the collaboration for better productivity, and then there's a coolness factor all the way on the right. So, you know, putting screens outside of rooms, some of the new technology, the new pointer technology that we were talking about with Logitech a little earlier. It's just, is there a coolness factor, and does that coolness factor help you retain your employees? Does it help recruit those employees? So this workspace is evolving, right? If we look at the workspace 10 years ago, right, there was executives on the outside in the window offices, and then the inside was a bunch of very high-level cubes and some meeting rooms on the inside. What you're seeing today in the workspace is some hybrid of that. Predominantly, the windows are turned into the rank-and-file employees that have lower desks, more collaborative environments. Much more of the conference meeting space, however you want to define it, touchdown spaces, telephone booths, huddle rooms, small, medium-sized conference rooms. And then, you know, driving completely to this free address space, activity-based working, where anybody can go anywhere, wherever they want. And that's the trend that we're seeing. And the pros and cons, we can talk about a little of that later as well. So what are those elements of the new way of work? That happens to be our London office right there. So we've driven to this new way of work in our space. And you know, are you monitoring? Do you have sensors in there? Do you have ways to book your space? Do you have ways to get ad hoc meetings? How do you define that space and put policy across those different types of space? How do I have a policy on a phone booth or a touchdown space that may be different than a policy for a huddle room, that may be different for a policy of the large integrated conference room? And you know, how do you book those? How do you use the collaboration? How do you bring, you know, content sharing into a video conference that has desktop participants that are remote, and make sure that I have all the real estate where necessary reserved in those spaces and the technology that drives all that? So if we're working from anywhere, any device, anywhere, how does that technology change from the support to a mandatory component? We have to get out of these past norms, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as part of the session. But the past norm of I'm sitting in a workspace, I have to be there 9 hours a day, 8 hours a day, hey, I'll pay you for a lunch, I won't pay you for a lunch, and all that. We've got to break those norms if we're going to continue to be productive and meet the needs. So here's some of the key factors if you're looking at to ensure your workspaces are ready for tomorrow, as I continue to say today, is behavior, right? Are we supporting the behaviors out there? And these slides will be available after the show for you as well. So, and I think we'll have a video that's online for you as well as part of this. Right? Are we eliminating the stigma related to, hey, I'm a remote worker? Right? Are we supporting the behaviors that we need remote workers? We actually have a customer that gives employees a ticket, and they're only allowed to come to the office X amount of days per month. So you check in with a token, and you get maybe 10 days in the office a month, whether you want 5 and 5 or not. So, you know, it's a new way of saying, I'm saving real estate. You don't have to be in the office. Be in the office when you want. Right? So there's a lot of different behaviors that are able to be managed in this type of space. What is the environment? We're going to talk a little bit about noise levels a little later on. Plantronics is doing some cool things in that space. So we'll talk about some cool, and I have a picture a little later of their new offices and what they've done with some later technology of how they're getting rid of some of the ambient noise and using white noise technology, et cetera, to help build that environment. And then the meetings themselves, right? Are we providing all of the right capabilities so there's no bias? Me as a remote worker, am I having the same experience as somebody who's actually in that room? And I think Logitech was talking to me a little earlier about one of their new pointers that they have out there that tries to drive. If I'm using a pointer on there and we're doing this remote, the people remote can't see where I'm pointing against. Right? So being able to bring some technology in, so if I'm pointing against this here, that the people on the remote side have the ability to see that as well. And then the collaboration, which most of us are here today around the collaboration part and what are we doing it, but we want to make sure that the environment and behavior is taken care of as we're building these workspaces today. And this drives it, right? So Google CFO who's said everybody has to go back to the office. We heard the Yahoo story a couple of years ago about everybody having to go back to the office, yet right? He left the business because he needed more family time. And so, it's a little contradiction of terms of what they're trying to do to their employees and what they're seeing in their own personal life. Remote working is certainly becoming the norm. Just as a show of hands, how many people here have the ability to work remotely? Yeah, so it's here. Right? It's myself too. So we've gotten past that stigma. So then, more of how do we support it to get the best experience out of there. And we know this, and it's a challenge. And I spend most of my time on a plane, train, or an automobile, whether it's at customer sites, partners, or in our various offices. But I do miss that. Hey, there's the lunchroom talk and the collaboration associated with that. But it's different if you bring in the technology and you say, okay, we're using, we use internally Yammer as our business, and that's how we try to get that social water cooler talk going on. And we have more ad hoc meetings. Well, we try to schedule a space, but more ad hoc meetings in there. And we know, I think all of us here, probably 95% of us raised our hands of working from home. I think corporations get more productivity out of us working at home. And they're certainly we're collectively picking up 2 hours, our commute there, our commute back. We're probably giving one of those hours back to the company as well, as part of what we're doing. I know in my life it's much more than that. Changing the norms. This is the Plantronic site here, and they've been a leader in this space for a long time. They're eating their own dog food, of how they're driving into that space, and I know Bo's going to talk a little bit later about some acoustical things that they're doing in their space as well. But this is a great example of just re-architecting the way you do business, re-architecting the way you work, right? And then having a change management plan in place to make sure that you're getting the buy-in from the top and the bottom part of that. These are some of the things that I've talked about in-office biases. And so you hear the colleague in the room, you're hearing somebody use technology. You see a colleague in the room, you see colleague over video, you hear the presentation, you see the presentation. I think we're seeing more of the interactive whiteboards. We just did a 2-week roadshow on some products that we're launching. Talked to 28 of our customers in the last 2 weeks, and it's amazing how everyone asked us how we're playing with the interactive whiteboards and how we can do more with interactive whiteboards. It'd be interesting to see, maybe we'll get into some of the questions a little later of how that's resonating across our audience. Look around the room for reactions, right? We're on video, we're seeing that. I know I do a lot of screenshots now when I'm as part of this, is capturing shots of screens of briefings that I'm getting, et cetera. And I think most of the people are doing that there. And then how do we catalog that? How do we find it? Does it get lost on your system? So there's some things that we can do to get smarter around that. But the key here is 95% of us are working remote, right? We have to have the same capabilities of us being in the office. At the end of all of this, collaboration, working together on this, it's really about the business outcomes. All the things that we're doing is to drive some sort of business outcome. Whether it's the agreements, the communication, the actions on that. We have the technology to do that. We have the design specificity of how to move your space into this. but at the end of the day, we have to still think we're doing all of this to drive some sort of business requirement and a very real business outcome. Part of the forgotten part around all this is how do you manage all of this space? I mean, there's integrated workspace management systems out there that run lease management, they run operations management, project sustainability. There's a whole component of how are you managing your real estate in this workspace of today or this new world of work. And then some of the traditional space planning on there. Sorry about that. Some of the traditional space planning component about, you know, how do I stack my rooms? What if scenarios are in there? We'll talk a little bit about this, but there's an entire tool set that helps you manage this, or what are the right ratios do you have from rooms to employees? What are the right ratios that you have for hot desks to employees? And how are you going to figure that out and what makes sense in your workspace? So traditionally it was a bunch of CAD drawings and spreadsheets and a lot of people working, trying to do this, you know, people walking around with clipboards saying, okay, I'm going to walk around at 2 o'clock today and see who's in their space. People walking around at 4 o'clock today, who's in their space. You know, hiring a bunch of interns to do this. You don't get seasonality of how you're using your space. So there's a lot of new tools out there that are driving, you know, the space utilization analytics, the heat maps, and the smart buildings on this. So as you're thinking about planning this new way of work, it's not just the technology, it's how you're managing the real estate combined with the technology, and are you using the right tool sets for that. This is just some screenshots of some folks that we work with. So, you know, here's your portfolio modeling, here's your ratio seating. Are we getting that ratio seating? If the ratio seating is too high, how do we adjust that? How do you use sensors to help determine that workspace utilization in advance of making your move? Like typically, we see people with our sensors that they're looking about 3 years out of how do I use my space today? I want to manage it. I want to put sensors into that space so that when I'm taking a move, maybe to Hudson Yards in New York City, which is I think the largest construction project for office space in the US today, I'm moving in there in 12 months, 18 months, 2 years. You know, what kind of space do I need? How do I architect that space? What does it look like? And then building things like this, heat maps. So this is my space today. Here's the heat maps associated with those space. These, if you wrap some activity-based working around that, then you can see that, you know what, finance is red all the time because finance is in the office. Let's just give finance some fixed desks. And they don't have to have some hot desks. Right? Maybe marketing is, you know, maybe in the yellow area. But it's not guesswork anymore, right? There's tool sets out there that allow us to truly determine with empirical data what your workforce is doing, and then you can make some smart decisions based on that. And what is that benefit of those spaces? Clearly, it's, you know, if you're talking to the real estate folks, it's about saving money. If you're talking to the IT folks, it's about being more efficient, maybe some cool designs in that space. But there's the second order effects associated with this as well. How do you attract that talent? How do you maintain that talent? How do you minimize absenteeism? And how do you make sure that you're not losing the key resources of staff, keep consistency in your staff? So the solutions are out there today that support this, both on the physical workspace side as well as the collaboration technology side. It's downstairs. There's a lot of cool stuff downstairs. There's a lot of stuff on the facility side that is not. I think Jason's going to talk a little bit about neocon a little later and some of what he saw this week in that conference that's about facility and furniture and kind of where that convergence is happening in that space as well. So with that, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll come to the crowd, ask some questions, and then hopefully we'll have some educational comments. So Jason, we'll start. Sure.
Hello. Pull this a little further away. So my name is Jason Moss. I work at Logitech. I lead our go-to-market organization for video collaboration. So we work with all of our third-party partners to try and bring different workplace solutions around our products to the market. And a big part of my job also is looking at kind of the future of work, different workplace design. as Ken mentioned, I was out at NeoCon, which is a big furniture show. It's like CES for furniture. Quite a fascinating place. This is my third year in a row going, seeing the transition from all these people where very confused by technology. Kind of the first year I was there, why are you there? To the second year starting to embrace it, to this year where some of the places you can distinguish a showroom setup from something you might see at a technology show versus a furniture show, as they start to drive that integration there. So I spent a lot of my time in that, and a couple other work groups focused on kind of this workplace, and then bringing that back into Logitech, where we're trying to design very specific products to solve the needs of these new modalities of work that keep showing up.
Great, thanks. Michael?
My voice almost gave out on me before I talked, so I'm sorry about that. Michael DeBella with Kramer, Kramer Electronics. I'm the Director of Product Marketing. My job and my role is not too dissimilar from my colleague Jason here. On the surface, obviously, Kramer has a ton of different products, which is my job to bring to market, find the strategy, educate the marketplace on. The other part of, frankly, what I need to do is find new technologies to integrate into what, was previously conceived as a rather conservative business, kind of that black box. So, 7, 8 years ago, I was introducing wireless technology, wireless collaboration into our market space. I've dealt with web-based control systems. And the other piece of what I do is how do you take existing technologies, marry them with what is new to create, a lot of what Ken was talking about in this new way of looking at how technology kind of suits today's employee, as opposed to in the past, the employee had to deal with whatever that company had. So, it's kind of an industry in transition, and, if you think about it at a surface level, it's easy to say, Kramer does black boxes, AV, Logitech does cameras, but it has to be so much more than that, and that's kind of the fun of what I do. So, anyways, some background.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Fitch. I'm the Vice President of North American Sales for Revo Labs, or Yamaha UC, as some of you may have seen. Very exciting stuff coming out from our standpoint this week. I've been in the UC space for the better part of the past 10 years, on both the software or hosted side as well as the hardware side. I'm relatively newer here to Revo Labs, only been here for about 6 months, but I've been in sales for the majority of all those 10 years, speaking with clients, going out, speaking with resellers, speaking with distributors, etc. So have amassed a great deal of, I guess you would say, knowledge in the space of collaboration, workspaces, and seeing that shift, and really a huge shift over the past 5, especially 10 years, from what we were selling and what we were giving and pushing to our clients even 3 years ago compared to what we're talking about now, and how the workspace has changed so greatly. And it's really, really, really exciting, and I think it's even tough for us to keep up, let alone the end users or the folks who are actually utilizing the technology. And trying to, for a lot of the folks in this room, I'm assuming, trying to distribute that technology to your end users is even more difficult, right? And perhaps the greatest challenge of all is the education piece of it. So, very, very excited to be here and hear your comments, and hopefully get a little bit from us and some more from you. So, thanks.
Good morning, guys. Bo Wilder at Plantronics, responsible for our new product strategy. Been there 16 years or so. And as Ken alluded to, at Plantronics, we have a distinct philosophy about living and breathing the future before our partners and our customers do, so that we actually can build the right solutions and live all of the pain for them, and so that they don't necessarily have to go through all the bumps and bruises that we do in order to build the right stuff. So you saw a brief slide there of our Santa Cruz headquarters, where we've actually really pushed the boundaries on, not only enabling work from any place on any device and delivering the right audio endpoints to enable that for each knowledge worker, which is our core business, but really pushing the boundaries on what that future office space workplace looks like. So really breaking down all the walls, getting the CEO literally sitting a couple of desks away from the interns into a big open office space, and some of the challenges that come with that. And we learned very quickly that while it's a very attractive, aesthetically pleasing, early bid of, yes, I want to work in that space, actually trying to do your work actually gets challenging often. Especially when you're trying to do individual contribution work rather than the collaboration work. And so we actually home grew a solution, we can maybe talk about a little bit, to solve our own problem, our own acoustic noise pollution problem in the open office space, because we tried everything else that was out there available on the open market, and it didn't really solve our problem at all. And so we actually home grew something, and we host a lot of customers on tours because they want to actually know what Plantronics is doing about the way we're working in the future office space. It's really striking a chord with customers and partners. So happy to talk more about that when we get into it.
Great.
We have an abundance of microphones.
Yeah, I don't
Turn that one off so I give you feedback. I'm Brady Bruce. I'm Chief Marketing Officer for Infocus Corporation. And gosh, I've been doing this a long time. My first startup was in 1990, a company called VTEL. We were one of the first video conferencing technology companies and have been in this space ever since. At Infocus, gosh, we introduced the Mondo Pad, which is an all-in-one touch-enabled screen, large size. It has video conferencing and audio conferencing built in. The ability to ideate, draw on screen, and make presentations and annotate on top of things in a whiteboard, access things to the network, store and record. We introduced that product 6 years ago and have it deployed in tens of thousands of locations around the world. And lately, good to see that a number of other new products in the touch-enabled space have come to market. Where we're particularly interested at Infocus is on the kind of productivity that these devices and this kind of interaction is capable of yielding, and then making sure that the user experience across really any kind of device is the same. As we talked about earlier, the workspace is anywhere. In fact, in our booth, we have scenarios set up here. We're showing people work in an airport departure lounge, work in a home office, work in an executive office, work in a huddle space, work in a conference room, work in a control room. The workspace essentially is wherever the worker is. And I think one of the things that all of us here spend our time thinking about is, can I provide an experience in all of those places that yields the same level of productivity, the same familiarity with the tools that allows us to work together, whether we're in the same room or across the planet from each other, and how can I make that as valuable to the organization that adopts it as possible? And I hope today we spend a little bit of time talking about how that mix of tools that go into all of these different places yields that kind of productivity and that kind of satisfaction that every employer and every employee is looking to get.
Great. Thank you, panelists, again. Thank you for being here. Brady brings up an interesting point about user experience, and we talk about the user experience. And a lot of things that we're driving in the user experience is certainly going to a mobile-first environment. We're seeing a lot of our customers and the millennials driving to that mobile-first environment. But it's bigger than the user experience. It's really about the employee experience in general, just not the technology, but their experience at work. And if we improve the employee experience, then we should improve productivity, right? And then this war on talent then gets easier to recruit in that space as well. So it's a good topic about the experience with that. I have all kinds of questions that I can certainly ask the panelists, but I do want this to be interactive. I want to get as much, for you to get as much out of this as possible. So I'll ask at least a few overall questions, and then hopefully I'll take some questions for the crowd, for the panelists to answer, and then if not, I'll certainly ask those questions. But we're talking about this new world of work, and I asked a question about remote work, but how many people are in an office today that has hot desking, that they redid their space, they have huddle rooms, and they're really moving into that new way of work as I showed in that earlier slide? So about a quarter, I guess a little more than a quarter of the room is in there. Those people who didn't raise their hand, how many people are moving to that in the next 6 months? Not many. Okay, nobody. 12 months down the line, are we looking at that? So, okay. So we have some people who've crossed the chasm, some people in the short term are probably just thinking about it now, and then clearly there's some folks here who have it on the long-term horizon. Are there some questions that you want answered as part of this crowd? Is something that you want to take away on that we can ask the panelists, and then I'll certainly, again, jump in on some questions. So if you wouldn't mind, just introduce yourself and where you're from, and then the question. Thank you.
Brent Daniel from Tennessee. So we have offices all across the U.S., UK and Ireland. Any consideration to the way people work culture? West Coast people do not operate like we do in Tennessee. And our folks in the UK, jolly good as they are, they work different as well.
I'll jump in there a little bit. Plantronics is definitely a global company. We thought about that a lot. We actually put a strategic initiative together inside the company to make sure we were operating like a global company and not a company only out of headquarters that everyone else is a satellite office. So putting a strategic initiative together actually was the first step, right? And actually vocalizing that inside the company went a long way. But then putting actionable steps, and it was simple things, like when you do a town hall, actually make it painful for headquarters sometimes at a different hour, and it actually makes it easy for your E&A offices to attend on the local time, right? And actually doing those types of things is really, really important. Even celebrations, like if you have a big quarter or whatever, a product launch, it's not just a headquarters celebration, but it's a global celebration. It's about the culture and making sure everyone feels like they're part of that bigger team rather than just headquarters and satellite offices everywhere. The little steps go a long, long way. Just doing it on their time zone, it has been a huge shift for us.
Yeah, we've implemented that same thing as our CEO town halls now rotate to the different continents and running at different time frames, which is important. Although I do remember at times having to tell some of our engineers coming in from California, going into a federal account, that they do have to put socks on, and samples don't work. So those are just some everyday coaching things that we're going to have to do.
And from a technology standpoint, I think you want to create consistency amongst the offices as well, right? That's key. You don't want your headquarters to have all of this fancy, great stuff and then give nothing to these other offices, because then when the folks come to your headquarters office to visit, they have no idea how to use the technology, right? So you want to ensure you're creating consistency across all of your meeting spaces, if we're talking about meeting spaces here in this meeting, ensuring that every employee knows when they enter a meeting space, that they know how to use that technology, they're comfortable, and it's simple and easy to use. That's key as well. And I think that's where a lot of major corporations seem to struggle. They have disparate systems across all over the place, and it's not good for employees, and the employee experience suffers.
And I think to piggyback on that is exactly right. Every space needs to have the same technology. I mean, it's versioned for different spaces. But I think the company has to adopt some rigor about using it. I mean, to a certain amount, you should shame people who go to the airport. If you've got technology to collaborate, you should be using it every day. It's really, eating your own dog food. And the culture shifts. It's not necessarily instantaneous, but it does shift. And people come to see that interacting and collaborating remotely using the systems that you've provided them is as good as being in person minus the jet lag. And it really does work. And you get to a point, I know certainly in our own culture, we have video phones at everybody's desk. We all have the software on our mobile devices and our laptops. We have the interactive Mondo pads on the walls and many of the technologies that we build up for ourselves. And it now feels odd for any of us to talk to each other without being able to see each other. It feels odd for us to talk on a phone without a common PowerPoint presentation or something else we can all look at remotely. It takes time and it takes diligence to transform the culture.
Yeah, there's not a meeting invite that I don't send out that doesn't have video on it. I go video first all the time. I don't know if most of you do. And then I drive that as, hey, you're not on video today. What's going on?
Yeah, I think we also, we take a step back,
you know, and I think it's an interesting question, right? How do you merge all of the different behaviors, both in terms of inter-department, but you also have regional, and then you also have age brackets, right? I'm 44. I need an office with a closed door, you know, and as you were alluding to, you put me in the middle of an open floor plan. I'm not sure I can be too agreeable to work with 8 hours a day, you know. So, but I think that the bigger piece from a business perspective, and you know, I'd like to actually ask the group, how many end users versus integrators are in the room? How many end users are here? All right, so maybe about 30, 40%. You know, I think that both groups have to understand that the #1 driver in technology, and really the biggest shift, and I think that something that we all struggle with sometimes, is we've gone from a feature-rich mindset of kind of beating our chest, hey, my box, my camera, my whatever could do this, to we need to lead conversations with ROI and data analysis, analytics. So to that point where if I could produce a bunch of different spaces, as a technology provider, I need to be able to show, hey, is this room being used? Because you had in one of your interesting slides as you were talking about a certain amount of those spaces, you know, only being used 30, 40%. Well, that means the air conditioning is still going on. There's still electric going on. So there is a capital expense against that. And one of the more interesting things for me being in kind of the AV technology space is we get to have more business-like conversations that trickle down to those kind of, you know, that very decentralized type office space, because at the end of the day, you could have all the cool technology in the world, but as you talked about, if you're not using it, if it's too expensive, all of these other things, it's gonna fall apart. And, you know, for me, that is the biggest shift that I've seen, that I begin conversations about black boxes, about not only the soft dollars in terms of the productivity, like I said, the hard dollars in terms of electric and all the expense that goes into meeting spaces. And that has to be measured at some point and then reported back. And that's collectively our jobs.
Yeah, Michael, you bring up a good point there. Some of the things that we're looking at is via scheduling. We know if those rooms are booked or not. We know the location of those rooms. We know where the sun is related to those. So there may be times where you want to raise the air conditioning room, not necessarily saving money, but increasing the user experience in that room. Or you know that a certain area of the building is underutilized for that particular day, and maybe you want to move everybody to another part of that building and realign some of the rooms. So it's a great point on the analytics, but not just having the analytics, but actionable items that come out of the analytics, and then being able to automate those things. And a lot of us are looking into that in the future. Another question, sir, right there.
Gary Anselm, out of New York. Question for you guys is, how often are you doing user experience polling or research to determine what your users want, right? Whether, you know, because you're going to have different personas across your organization, and global companies, right, have various different personas. Are you doing user research annually or every 5 years to determine what technology or what steps you should be taking?
Yeah, that's an awesome point, at least for me, the manufacturer. You know, the term beta site is part of my everyday vernacular. Whether it be, you know, in higher education, we're only going to designate 1 or 2 classrooms, see if there's adoption, see how the teachers like it, that kind of thing. To even corporate, it's almost shootouts that I've had with competition where we're going to have a Kramer room and brand B room, and the employees make that decision, and that's on the front end. And then you're talking about on the back end, you know, that kind of almost relates back to the data analytics, where if things aren't being used, if the devices, technology are not being used, then things end up phased out and other people come in. But, you know, at least for me, that beta site, you know, very few calls do I get where the technology hasn't been tested, beta tested, and have that type of environment, you know, as opposed to, you know, the olden days where, hey, you know, I have 100 rooms, I need 100 pieces of the technology to go into it, you know, so that's definitely a great shift that, you know, I'm glad you brought up.
Yeah, so this is something that we do at Logitech a lot. So a lot of people know us for traditionally where we came from, keyboards, mice, you know, some end user products, which were always designed for very simple, easy user experiences. So we're kind of product nerds at Logitech. So what we do is we're constantly doing customer insights. We have an entire customer insights team that's constantly looking at things, but we use our own employees. And what we have actually set up is these little kiosks where we just put out new products. and people walk up and they just try them out, and there's like a Google form sitting there on the screen, and people just leave comments. And there's some of the harshest comments that you'll ever see. If you're a product manager, it's almost like a real brutal job at Logitech, because you're always being ripped by the employees. But it's a constant loop of feedback. And then what we do is we also bring in other companies' products and other things, and things that aren't even necessarily competitive analysis or anything like that. It's just, this is a cool experience. What do you guys think of it? And we have designated areas in central lobbies, and also what we have is kind of experimental rooms where we'll just put it in there and maybe a little blurb that says, you know, what this is. This is a whiteboarding solution, try it. And we give zero instruction on how it works. And we let people go, because we feel if it needs instruction, then it's not going to be good. Because if everything we want to be successful in these workplaces and going across many cultures, many age groups, many regions, people just have to be able to intuitively pick it up and know it. So that's kind of the bar that we hold for ourselves.
Yeah, that's a high bar. I applaud Logitech for that. Putting that out, anonymous feedback in there early in the development cycle is important. I guess what I would say back to the end users out there is when manufacturers, developers like us come out to you, to be part of those focus groups, because it is important for all of us to get that end user experience and feed those requirements into certainly our roadmap, or at least things for us to consider. So please do that. Gary, thanks for that question. That was good. Question from anybody else? Yes?
Julia Bailey from Vancouver. The biggest complaint I hear from end users is about the noise pollution. They can't hear themselves think in the open space. How do you deal with that? The rest of the technology works great, but if I can't hear myself think, I'm not going to be able to get my work done.
So maybe I'll take that, given we're dog fooding that right now. So yeah, that was, I think that's the journey that most of our customers go down. Ken alluded to it a little bit. I think the #1 driver of consolidating the workplace at the early days is about the real estate cost savings. And they're just too good to pass up. Literally tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars can be saved by putting more people into a denser office location. There's also the second promise, and I call it promise, of increased collaboration. Because I think that's the goal, that's the internal messaging. But what in reality happens is with noise pollution, because there isn't a great solution out there right now, is people are spending so much more time trying to do their own individual productivity work that they actually have less time for collaboration. Gensler actually showed that in their 2013 workplace survey result. They built open offices. They were a big lead design firm pushing this open workspace environment. And they built these for increased collaboration. And when they measured the results 5 years later, 2008 to 2013, collaboration actually went down 20%. And it's because when they dug into it, I mean, hugely insightful, they got the inverse result of what they intended to get, and it was noise pollution. I mean, their data showed 69% of people were dissatisfied with the noise levels in their office space. So we ran into the same problem at Plantronics. We were big open offices. We put C-level, again, next to interns and everyone else in between in a big open pit. What we found was there wasn't a great solution available in the marketplace. We tried the traditional sound masking solutions, which is kind of a filtered pink noise, which raises the ambient noise level to reduce the intelligibility of human speech. But we got the typical response of, it's actually an unpleasant environment to work in. People were complaining of headaches. They started to abandon the workspace, or they'd go hide in a huddle room and turn it into their private office, right? And that caused a whole bunch of different issues. So since we actually hacked our own solution, this many years ago, we actually developed something that took the human first approach and actually brought in natural sound into the office space, which the Finnish Institute of Occupational Health was doing some groundbreaking work around biophilia in the office and the environment that you could actually build for an employee that is not only functional for productivity and collaboration work, but actually rejuvenating and reinvigorating for the employee to actually work in. And we actually brought that concept into our office and developed a system that actually allows for the overall well-being of the employee and for that productivity and collaboration work to coexist. So that's how we solved it internally at Plantronics. We've got enough interest in it that we're looking at, bringing it to market fairly shortly, actually, because we didn't think there was a good solution out there.
And from our standpoint, we're looking at it, agreed, there is, a problem, right? Everyone's moving to these open workspaces, there's a bunch of noise. We're also looking at it from our standpoint and the technology that we're developing that I can only unfortunately speak limitedly about, but we're looking at it from the far end side, right? So you're in these open workspaces, you're having these meetings. You are on some sort of Skype for Business, WebEx, whatever the product of your choice is that you use. The folks on the other end are having a terrible experience as well, right? Because that system is picking up all of the noise that's going on around you. You have another group meeting over there and the lunchroom over there and whatever's going on over here, these people, this guy's on the phone. And all of that is being picked up and sent through the system through to the other end, and they're getting a terrible experience. So what we're looking at and what we're trying to develop and what we're developing is a solution that assists taking that noise out of the equation and creating a situation where you may be on the other end, and unfortunately I have to deal with it on my side, but you're not hearing it on the other side. And that's the way we're looking at it from a Yamaha UC standpoint. So very exciting stuff and really cool technology. So two different standpoints. So the two of us are together.
You're solving for the far end. We're solving for the
exactly.
in office.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was, sorry, hold this a little further away. This was a huge topic at NeoCon, the furniture show. So as you can imagine, workplace design is like the lifeblood of what they're doing over there. And they talked about everybody was in cube farms, and now the pendulum has swung too far to everybody's in an open office, an open desk. And so that was the big part of the discussion there. There's kind of a move back to the mean. So the company that we're partnered with there is Herman Miller, and they have this thing called the living office framework. Same thing as activity-based working, but the basic principle of the living office is you imagine your office like your home. When you're at home, you cook in the kitchen, you sleep in your bedroom, you get productivity work done in your office, you relax and socialize in your living room. And you move throughout your home to do different activities throughout the day. And they say the #1 problem with open office is that people implanted the idea of office spaces and cube farms into the open office where you still walk in and you have one desk. And so you're sitting there in that open office at that one desk and you're trying to get your work done, but somebody's talking over here, or maybe you're ready to socialize and things like that. So what you talked about is a lot of the frustration is that the people are stuck in one location the whole time. And so it may be okay for a couple hours a day, but if you're there 8 hours, 6 of the hours you're trying to get work done, 2 hours might be okay. So all the different furniture companies are embracing this kind of living office concept. So you can have the huddle room, or you can not have a permanent desk. And you can go over to a co-create area, or you can go to a focus area where you can get quiet work done. And they're finding that the outcomes of people in those kind of living office environments are far better, because sometimes we do like the noise. We like the noise and the energy. You don't want to get to the library effect where everybody's whispering. It seems so quiet and you don't know what to say. So if you look at it from a perspective of, don't just give people one place to work, give them a variety of workplaces. Just from that human dynamic, it starts to help out quite a bit.
Just to shine a light on something that he said that I hope doesn't get missed. He talked about the idea of implanting, essentially technology, implanting workspace. And I think that has been in the past, and kind of what you're talking about, this fundamental problem where and this is ironic coming from a manufacturer whose job it is to create these fabricated, sometimes work environments, but we look at our technology, we force it in, whether you're an integration company trying to come up with this innovative idea or the manufacturer coming up. One of the greatest trends that I like from a business perspective that I've seen, really that millennials have driven, is more corporate transparency, right? So you have a workforce who is driving the technology and what they need, and it's very close to what you're saying. It's a group saying, yeah, well, I want an open floor plan, but maybe for 30% of the office, but I do need my C-level guys out in the, in a corner where I can't hear them when they're talking about who they're going to lay off, or something like that. And I think that the involvement of a younger generation into the corporate decisions, as it relates back to technology, which relates back to my happiness, and I'm glad that you mentioned a couple of times employee retention and acquisition. because that is the thing that is overlooked so often when it comes to our worlds. It's, you know, based on the technology, I'm going to make a decision based on how I communicate normally within the outside, because the social world has come into our world. So if you bring that one step further and how we design and how we work together, you have to have that employee involvement. And corporate transparency has been such a huge beneficial trend, at least that I've seen on my end, in terms of building technology that people like. Because we talked earlier about, hey, if you don't use it, you don't like it, I'm going to give you data analytics that the room's not being used. Now Kramer sucks, we're never going to use you again. So it's, you know what I mean? So, you know, it's advantageous that we all have this type of view, at least mine.
Yeah, thanks. Just to comment on the trend that certainly we're seeing. I mentioned earlier, I did this 2-week, 28 customer tour, you know, getting the pulse of where they're at, what they're doing, design, et cetera. One of the interesting things that I found in that, and it's a little scary for, you know, some of the people down on the show floor, is this simplification of the conference room, the huddle room. The lack of need today to have anything plug in. To go into that room and have a wireless capability that goes into an interactive whiteboard, that goes into a screen, that just does what you need to do. One button push to launch the video conferencing associated with that, removing a lot of these control panels. Like we had one customer that was going to save $4+ million a year just on operator costs associated with 1,200 panels that were inside the room. So we're seeing a significant drive into simplification of those rooms. That doesn't mean some of those rooms still need, you know, to be highly integrated, but they're special purpose rooms and they're not the everyday rooms. So maybe to the panel, are you seeing that across your customer base as well?
That's the thing. If the room is not easy to use, the people are not going to use it. Bottom line, right? So if it's not a single button to push to start the meeting, or one wire to plug in, or whatever it is, your end users are just not going to use it. And they'll come into
no wire to plug in.
Yeah.
Wireless on the screen.
Well, I think it's almost worse than no one using it.
They're not going to collaborate either.
Well, yeah, but from an IT perspective, right? I mean, I'm guessing that we have some IT managers in this group, or people who are working with IT managers. Obviously, everyone in integration is. Control, management of content, of data, right? So to your point, if I have let's simplify, a conferencing system that I can't figure out how to turn on, what's a 30-year-old going to do? Reach into the conferencing system that they carry with them at all times, and instead of using the Skype for Business that has been controlled into the system that they can't figure out, they're just going to FaceTime the person someplace else. And now you're going to have this proprietary content going over an open data stream. And, you know, to me, that's where it becomes horrifying. So it's worse than, yeah, you're right. You know, obviously you're not going to use it. But now when we talk about data integrity, data breaches, things like that, and think about it, what is a meeting space about? It's interacting on content. At the end of the day, it's about content. And you'd like to think that there's value to that content that you're interacting, or else why did I hire you and why are you meeting, right? So if I'm going to put that over an unsecured line, that becomes an inherent corporate problem. And that's something that we always have to think about in terms of how we design those systems. Simplicity, but why does it need to be simple? To protect our data and content, you know?
It drives this term ghost IT.
Yes.
Because if you're doing the back channel on that, anybody who runs an IT organization doesn't need a ghost IT organization.
And the other thing, you know, you mentioned ROI earlier. You're going to spend all this money to outfit all these rooms that no one's going to use, which makes no sense whatsoever, right? And again, you know, you talked about the lower cost, the costs are continuing to go down for these solutions to outfit these rooms. And, you know, with the large corporations have thousands of huddle rooms or open workspaces that you guys want to outfit with technology. That's what the trend is. You need to figure out how to outfit these rooms. You need to be easy to use, or else you're going to run into problems like that and terrible ROI.
Yep. So we got about 5 minutes left. So what I'd like to do is answer one more question, and then I'm going to ask the panelists as we close out of, you know, potentially identifying one landmine that you maybe want to avoid as you're looking at this new workspace future. So one last question.
Brandon from Michigan. How do you guys view the ecosystem? So each of you do different things. And as you know, the market evolves and early adopters embrace new technologies, they're going to increasingly want more of that contiguous process experience across a variety of touch points. So as manufacturers and software providers, how do you think about that?
I'll go ahead and start that one. So at Logitech, everything we do is based on open standards. And so we have an open SDK, SRK. We're coming out a little bit later this year with an open set of APIs. So anybody can write or do anything they want with our equipment, and everything that we can't use an open standard for, we post to GitHub, we put it into the open source community now. Because what we believe is the way the market is moving to is really best of breed. You have 5 vendors up here that all do a bunch of different things, and we all do it really well, right? You know, Plantronics has amazing audio capabilities that, you know, Logitech, we have audio capabilities too, but it might not be the right thing for your environment. But we have these great cameras, so we would still want our camera to work with Plantronics. And so we want to take an open approach to the ecosystem, let the customers decide what they need at what time, and drive it that way.
I would say that I absolutely agree on that. I think the other thing to look for is if you're sourcing a set of solutions, and someone's coming to you and telling you you're going to need this outside system to manage all of those pieces, you ought to go back and look again. Look for products that integrate well with each other. We all embrace standards, that's critical. Many of us work together on common solution sets. We know how to work together without having to add a third control layer to all of that. So if you find partners who are accustomed to working together, whose systems are well integrated together, that embrace standards so we all interoperate, that's critical.
Yeah, I think you have to drive to an open API. We can't build every connector to everything that we want or our customers want to integrate with. But if we have a RESTful API with well-documented access to that, then that begins the process. So I think that's critical. You know, on the front end, if you look at what is the modality of access, you're working on your cell phone, it's one modality. Certainly, another modality is coming in through Outlook or Exchange. And then, you know, are you working with those sets as you're building the first entry to whatever you're doing? Are you integrating from AWS, Exchange, API, over 365? Are you looking at the Google interface and trying now with a lot of new companies with green space products moving into there? Are you integrating there? It's all critical as part of making sure what I talked about earlier is the user experience and the employee experience.
That's good. All right, so with that, Brady, I think I'll start with you. Go left to right. You know, a nugget, a roadblock, something that you want to throw out to say, you know, be aware of this as you're building your workspaces of today.
Well, again, I'll go back to the point I made earlier, which is the experience, the user experience needs to be common across all venues and all platforms. If I'm accustomed to using a particular communication and collaboration system in the office space that the company has provided, I need to have access to systems that I use when I'm in an airport, when I'm in my home office, when I'm in a customer office, that look and feel the same. Right? I shouldn't have to learn multiple interfaces, multiple ways of working. I should have one way of working that's indigenous to my company and our culture and works well in that space.
What I would say is any workplace transformation, you need to really take into consideration all 3 of the major pillars, right? So people, places, and technology. If you don't address all 3, the one you didn't look at is going to make you fall down. I would also say don't underestimate the people side of it, the change management side of it. A lot of us are technologists in the room. We like technology. But the people aspect, you know, if you don't get that right, it just will fall down. And then the last one I'll just leave with is I think we have designed technology, we've designed workplaces, we haven't designed for sound. And I think your question was spot on for that. I think that's been an overlooked part of actually delivering a future office workspace that actually works, allows you to save money, but to productive work and collaboration working at the same time. So think about designing for sound.
Mike, 30 seconds.
Agreed. I'm going to say, listen, agreed with all these guys. Simplicity, cost effectiveness, right? And consistency across the board need to be in place. And if they're not, you're going to run into problems. The last thing also that nobody's really talked about, end user education. You have to educate your end users on how to use the technology that you're moving towards, or else none of it's going to matter. You're going to run into the same problems.
Yeah, I think for me it's two things. Flexibility, throwing away that term future-proofing because it's ridiculous. Technology has to be able to evolve and grow, and the other piece is the lowest common denominator, meaning we think about who's your buyer, right? The IT guy or whatever. No, who's the user, and kind of what you're talking about. It's the accounting guy, it's the woman in HR. They need to be part of that process for implementing technology, adopting technology, being trained on that technology. If you leave them out, to use your pillar example, it's going to fall.
Jason.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of what everybody said. You have to have the consistency of the technology, so everybody you're working with knows how to operate that technology. But at a certain point, you have to embrace the chaos. You need different workspaces. You can't sit everybody at a desk. You're going to need huddle rooms. You're going to need boardrooms. Some people are going to work from home. You have the older generation that was on PCs. Then the millennials pushes everybody to Macs. The youngest generation that's coming in, they all learned on Chromebooks from their school. So you have to be able to embrace all other pieces of the technology all at once. But the consistency, the meeting is the meeting. How you talk, communicate, collaborate, make that a consistent experience, but how people access that and experience that, that's where you can add your variety in.
My last nugget, it's transformational. Have a change management plan as part of this. Thank you for being engaged, audience. Thank you for the panelists. Have a great show.